You really want to be like me? Jesus. Listen, be an accountant. They've got all my money.
Motörhead, probably the fastest, loudest, most hated at the time, obnoxious, and coolest band to ever walk this earth. Just by existing, they accidentally helped create genres like speed metal, thrash metal, arguably were the biggest influences on black metal and death metal early on, just by mixing the sounds of early heavy metal and punk and rock and roll. Now, as many of you may know, Motörhead is about a bajillion albums, and many of you may not have gotten into them thinking that it is an overwhelming catalog to even look at. So let me help you. I will point you to the right albums to listen to from this band, but I'll tell you right away, most of them are either great or at least listenable. Everything with Motörhead revolves around the bass god, Lemmy Kilmister, who did bass and vocals and was such a badass on the bass that he treated it like a guitar and would play literal bass solos every time he could. Now, right before Motörhead, he had actually hooked up with this psychedelic space rock band called Hawkwind, and eventually became a pretty big songwriter in the band.
I went for a job as a guitar player with Hawkwind, and then they said they didn't need one, because Dave was going to play lead. But the bass player didn't show up because it was a free gig. And like an idiot, he left his bass in the gear van. Oh. So, please steal my gig. So I stole his gig.
But he became way too dangerous and overbearing for the rest of the band.
I got busted for what they charged me with. It was cocaine, but it wasn't, it was speed, so it was wrongful arrest, so the case was dismissed. I found out later that they only flew me into the gig and got me out of jail because the replacement couldn't get there in time. So I get there and everybody's out, Bonham, and we get on stage, thunderous applause, 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm fired.
So he had to have his own thing and hooked up with Philthy Animal Phil Taylor.
So he said, you're a drummer, right? And you've got a car. Of course, much later on I found out that he was only really interested in the car, getting a ride back. Because he'd run out of supplies, medical supplies.
And he had this denim pull-on hat, right, with a big A on the front, Captain Amphetamine, And he came out and he's naked. All these cottages all around, the curtains going back. He said, "It's all right, I'm on drugs."
Arguably my favorite member of the band, this guy has great feel on the drums and just always brought that punch no matter what direction they took. He seemed like he was the right man for it. And of course, the coolest guitarist ever, Fast Eddie Clarke.
We jammed for a bit, and I never heard anything, so I didn't think any more of it. I thought, oh, well, no, nothing's come of that, And then I'm sure it was about 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning. I'm in my flat in West Kent, and there's a knock on the door. Well, nobody knocks on the door at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I go to the door, and there's Lemmy standing there, and he's got the bullet belt in one hand and a leather jacket. And he hands them to me through the door, because I'm in my fucking underpants, And he says, "Here, you got the job."
When you formed Motörhead back in 1965, you said, "Motörhead will be the dirtiest rock and roll band in the world.
We are.
If we move next door, your lawn would die."
It has.
So you have here a golden lineup of A+ musicians that loved 50s rock and roll and blues with the attitude of punk and the riffs of heavy metal. There's not much to say about the super early recordings of Motörhead. It was originally called On Parole. They redid it as Motörhead. It's pretty decent, but it's mostly like punk rock and 70s rock. You have good songs in here like the title track, Motörhead, Vibrators, pretty good, White Line Fever, and the song Iron Horse, which actually sounds like it's straight out of Hawkwind. With this one, they were just getting their feet wet to kick everyone's ass.
And so I was practicing on my double bass drums, and I was just going, like that. And then I had a snare beat, and I was just basically just practicing that, seeing if I could keep time, and Eddie and Lemmy happened to arrive while I was doing that. And of according to them, they said they stood outside the room and they both said, "Oh, that's good," you know, to each other. So they came into the room and, you know, sort of mouthed to me, "Keep going, keep going."
Overkill! Overkill! Overkill!
All they had to do was outdo the first album. And what they gave us instead is one of the greatest albums ever made, Overkill. Song for song, arguably my favorite Motörhead album, and basically a best of compilation being all my favorite songs.
And we had practically Overkill was written, because once we had a go, we were keen as mustard, you know what I mean? They were just flowing out. It was fantastic, all this pent up stuff. We could write songs like that. It was brilliant.
I mean, this shit was so groundbreaking. It was at the head of the new wave of British heavy metal movement that was influencing every American metal band at this time.
Motörhead was one of the main reasons that I wanted to start a band myself and play music.
Especially with the title track and opening song, Overkill, Philthy Animal Taylor's double bass drum is exactly what every aggressive metal or extreme metal band would employ.
You know, and then it was like, hey man, this song's called Overkill anyway. Why don't we fucking finish and start again? Because, yeah, fucking great, man. In fact, let's do it again.
And as if it wasn't obvious that this band is just too heavy for rock and too cool to be metal, the song No Class sounds a lot like the ZZ Top classic, Tush, except it somehow even blows that away. I mean, left and right, you have the best songs of their career on here. Capricorn, which is slow and atmospheric. Metropolis, which feels very psychedelic, very Hawkwind inspired. Limb from Limb, extremely bluesy. And the coolest song they've ever done, the Sly Stay Clean. This is the beginning of the classic era of the band. All of these albums with this lineup, with the exception of the very earliest works, are golden.
One of the headlines we had, the worst band in the world, you know, but it was in big letters. Well, I mean, it was fucking great. You know, because I didn't give a f***. Well, you kind of care to a point, but, you know, but the kids were turning up, you know. I want to see the worst band in the world, you know. They must be great.
Now with Bomber, they had very little time to rehearse and work on this material, but it was not a step down. And speaking of step down, that's probably the best song on this album, one where Fast Eddie was actually peer pressured by Lemmy to do the vocals, and hits with some of his bluesiest solos he's ever done. Now it's interesting to note the song Dead Men Tell No Tales that even though Lemmy was a big fan of drugs, he hated heroin because it was always killing his friends. It killed one of his girlfriends, and it made the producer on this album completely neglectful and a useless piece of shit.
I've got at least 300 good friends, and intelligent people too. It's not morons that do it. I've got at least 300 or 400 good friends who are dead now because of heroin, or, you know, might as well be. Because it just takes everything away from me, that stuff. And I haven't been bribed, everybody. I hate heroin. And if I see anybody doing heroin at one of our gigs, I'll snap the needle in his arm and push the short end in.
Even the title track is an absolute classic off this one that they'd play live with the Bomber airplane on the stage that had tons of lights. And to be honest, even though it's one of the more overlooked albums, it is still almost as good as the album before it and after.
You've adopted the Ace of Spades as your motif. Why the Ace of Spades?
Because it's bad luck. Ace of Spades is bad luck, isn't it? See? So we figured if we use bad luck as our theme, then it can't get any worse.
Well, from being the worst band in the world in the Melody Maker, suddenly we're the fucking God's gift to music. Suddenly the sun shines out of our arse overnight. There was another thing on the radio that happened. The guy played it in the morning, He's played Motorhead, he says, all right, he took us off halfway through and says, you know, that's a bit much this time in the morning. They had so many complaints that he had to play it all the way through the next day.
Where Overkill was basically a best of compilation of their greatest material they'd ever make, Ace of Spades, although their second best album, is just nothing but an intense energy bomb. Front to back, it just does not stop with its even better production than anything they would ever do before or after. If most of my favorite Motörhead songs are on Overkill, the rest are on Ace of Spades. You have the title track, which Lemmy got so sick of playing live, even though it's a classic, that he would actually change the lyrics to say 8 of Spades. You also have the spaghetti western inspired Shoot You in the Back, Jailbait, which he'd play live frequently with Wendy O. Williams, who was his squeeze at the time, who was from the band The Plasmatics. And you also have great hits on here like Love Me Like a Reptile and We Are the Road Crew.
The road crew, I mean, they always get up to a lot more than you think, you know. And they're always at the gig before you. So, you know, you always get there, you know, and you find yourself kissing a chick, you know, and they say, hey, how do I taste? Fucking bastard. Somebody give them a blowjob in the fucking afternoon.
Not a single loss of momentum beginning to end, even when they slow down on the great Chase is Better Than the Catch, until the last track, my personal favorite Motörhead song, the speed metal attack of Hammer. Some classic metal albums are extremely overrated, but this one is not one of them. Highly recommended.
We weren't ready to do another album. I don't care what anybody says. That album was forced upon us. And then, of course, the record company crying out for this record. Got to have it, got to have it. So we give it to them. We do this fucking album cover that we weren't happy with. Doug Smith come up with this idea. Doug wants to make a film, start a film company. So he makes a film to start the Iron Fist tour. So he's using us again to give himself a foothold in the film business. So we all wear these helmets that he's had made and tromp about like cunts, you know.
We had the stage that came out of the ceiling with all the amps on it. That got stuck going back up, halfway back up in the Newcastle City Hall.
Didn't he get stuck at the beginning of the show once?
No, we come down all right and we got stuck going back up and it pulled the curtains open as well. We were all standing there going, what should we do now?
Now, this album was universally hated by the band because it had so many problems while they were making it, with the management, with their producer. They had to try to get Eddie to come in and actually produce it, but he didn't want to do it at all.
We talked to Chris Tangaridis. He wanted £10,000 up front. This other guy, John Anthony, he wanted 20 grand. And of course, that's where Doug Smith shot himself in the foot. He's only paying us £200 a week. When some cunt says he wants 10 grand to work on our album, that to us is a fucking king's ransom. You can fuck off, man. We're giving you 10 grand. So this went on and on. We couldn't agree with anybody. And then one day, Phil turned to me and said, listen, Eddie, why don't you do it? And I said, man, I don't want to do it. I'm playing on the record. And he insisted, he said, no, man. He said, the Tank record's good. He says, you can do it. He said, do it with Will Reed Dick, you know, this guy. And I was I'll tell you, I swear to God, I was reluctant as fuck.
And there was tons of drama within the band. It was just a complete and utter show. But honestly, I am so sick of the anti-Iron Fist propaganda that goes on. I mean, just because the band didn't care for it doesn't mean it's not a great album, guys. In fact, I think this is by far one of the greatest Motörhead albums ever made. It's a perfect follow-up to Ace of Spades. Is the production as good? Obviously not. But who cares when you have songs as good as these? You have classic catchy songs like America and Loser, which I highly doubt is autobiographical. Most of the songs are complete metal scorchers like Go to Hell, the title track, and the best song on here is Speed Freak, which is what the name Motörhead means.
Motörhead was speed music, speed music on speed, I think, and free people on speed.
I mean, there were at least 3 songs on there that weren't even finished, you know. We just finished them in the studio, like, and cobbled it together, like, and it just was a substandard album. But the trouble is, how do you follow a live album that went straight in at #1, you know?
Now on the tour for this album, things completely started to fall apart for the Golden lineup. Fast Eddie wanted nothing to do with the band when Lemmy wanted to do a cover of the song Stand By Your Man with his then girlfriend, Wendy O. Williams, and he thought the pussy was just completely going to his head.
And of course when I said, well, I'm leaving then, because I'd said it so many times before. I think they thought I was joking.
He used to leave every month anyway. It was just at that time we didn't talk him back in. You know, me and Phil were sick of it, you know.
And honestly, it's sad. The band will never be the same without this lineup, no matter what they do, no matter who they bring in. That doesn't mean that we don't have great albums to get to that are arguably even better than Iron Fist.
If you want to see some violence, baby, come and see me.
Look what they're doing! It's Silent Mode! Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this, Lemmy?
Why not?
I mean, you shouldn't be doing this.
Oh, sorry, we shouldn't be doing this. Oh, well.
You know I got a taste for you. I'm gonna make you shine.
Making of Another Perfect Day was fucking torture. Brian take 17 hours doing a guitar track, and then when it was released, everybody fucking hated it, so it was counterproductive, really.
The only problem with Brian being in Motörhead was the shorts. And literally, right, I mean, people will find this difficult to believe, but it was all down to the shorts.
I always thought it was a good record, but like, they just hated Brian. You know, because you don't replace a tall man with like very long red hair and like skinny legs and great hips with a fucking geezer who's dressed in green satin shorts and belly pumps.
So they lose a lot of that bluesier sound that Fast Eddie had, but when they brought in Brian Robertson from Thin Lizzy, they introduced a lot of musical and technical elements into the band. Thin Lizzy having a lot of melody in their sound. So bringing in Brian Robertson brought in a lot of technical guitar playing and guitar solos. Now, does this marriage of contrasting styles work? Absolutely. No matter what they're doing, if it's heavy rockers, catchy songs, bluesy songs, and especially your fast energy bomb Motörhead songs, it is a great marriage, especially on songs like Shine and my favorite, Back on the Funny Farm. Unfortunately, though, a lot of fans at the time were really stupid and absolutely would not resonate with this album. They constantly complained about it, and they had major issues with Brian Robertson, who would wear strange apparel on stage, and Lemmy just never liked the guy and always complained about him and said that he was just a pretentious dick and would essentially just want him gone no matter what and look for any excuse to get rid of him. And when he did, it made Phil Taylor want to go along with him. So for a little bit, unfortunately, we lose the best Motörhead drummer. Which I think is so stupid. Why let the dumb biker Motörhead fans dictate what you do in the band? Nowadays, it's considered one of their best classic albums. And you just squandered what would have been a great lineup for absolutely no reason. And hell, Lemmy used to wear Daisy Dukes and goofy shit on stage all the time, so who cares what Brian was wearing? So Lemmy needed a completely new lineup. He brought in the drummer from Saxon, who they used to tour with all the time, Pete Gill, and he needed 2 guitar players to ever replace someone as awesome as Brian Robertson, or God forbid, Fast Eddie Clarke. So we got Phil Campbell and Würzel, who used to be the guitar player for the new wave of British heavy metal band Warfare, which are really good, by the way. And with this lineup, they actually did a release called No Remorse that had some great songs, extremely underrated ones like Locomotive, which has got to be the fastest Motörhead song ever made, and the classic Killed by Death.
Been a long time between albums, and I mean that No Remorse greatest hits thing is really holding me together, but a lot of the fans are waiting with bated breath.
Bated breath?
Yes, bated breath. They have a cure for that. So when can we expect to see some new Motörhead?
Hopefully. We've been going through a lot of legal stuff for the last year, so hopefully it'll be out by the end of March, something like that, April.
So it's not that you guys aren't ready to record, it's just some legal difficulties?
Certainly not, people. We are ready and willing to record.
Producer made it sound like it was a hip-hop album with the way it was mixed, and the band never liked how it sounded.
The rough mixes on that album were great, and then he really cooked it up like. took it to New York and mixed it and come back with this terrible mess. Yet another instance of the producer thinking he's the artist, you know.
But honestly, the songs on here are incredible. Even though it starts with probably the worst song on the album, Death Forever, it's got great songs in here like Built for Speed, Dr. Rock, and one of my all-time favorite Motörhead songs, the fast barn burner Mean Machine. But even that fails in comparison to the old school rock and roll and thrash metal fusion song, The Claw. But of course, with the title track, which famously the band Sepultura covered, and it was not nearly as good as Motörhead's, this song is talking about politics, war, and religion, Lemmy's favorite topics, and just shitting on all of them. Being a slow, almost doomy song, it is one of Motörhead's most classic songs.
I am the one, Orgasmatron, the outstretched grasping hand.
I personally love this album a lot, and I'd highly recommend it, but just know going into it that the production's going to be awful. And the music is amazing. It's a great mixture of rock and roll and heavy metal. And speaking of rock and roll,
They always put it on us just because, you know, you look a little weird, you know, you don't look like the normal person. All politicians are completely normal, and they cause millions of people to die in death and agony, right?
Rock and roll bands
Rock and roll doesn't do that.
No.
Rock and roll saved millions. In Ethiopia. Don't tell me, right, about rock and roll.
I got rock and roll, it satisfies my soul. That's how it has to be. I won't get mad.
now even though Pete Gill was making the band a little bit faster than even Philthy Animal Taylor could, it was much better to have him back in the band.
And them screaming at Pete, saying, "Oh wait, I've been sitting in this cab for 20 minutes, man. Where were you?" And they just burst up like that, and Pete just walked like that. Lem said, "Oh, f*** off," and Pete said, "Oh, f*** off," or whatever, and walked. And it was a total misunderstanding.
I mean, a lot of you just can't hear it, but some drummers, no matter how fast or how technical they get, there's just something about a drummer with really good feel that's in the pocket. Now, this has to be the single most underrated Motörhead album ever. Even though it's called Rock and Roll, it's actually got some of their best, heaviest, most metal riffs on here, with songs like Traitor, The Wolf, You Can't Boogie with the Boogeyman, even the corny ass song Eat the Rich, which was in the movie and has a real goofy music video and lyrics, Come Get Your Eggs and Bacon Strips. It is a classic, and I even love that song. I love every damn thing on this album. Blackheart's great, and All For You, which is arguably the best song on here, has Würzel come in with one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Motörhead solo of all time, blowing away even the shit that Fast Eddie and Brian Robertson did. Without a doubt, the best Motörhead album ever, along with Overkill and Ace of Spades, and one album later on. Now, on the tour for this album, some asshole actually sent Lemmy to the emergency room.
What'd you
See
do?
the scar?
Yeah.
That was a razor blade in between two coins to give it more weight, taped up, thrown at me. Hit me on the first song. There was all this red on the stage. I thought somebody had a blood capsule, so I realised it was pumping out my hand.
Yeah, you don't. When you get caught with something super sharp, you don't even feel it.
On stage, you don't feel anything anyway.
No.
How does that impress your girlfriend?
I can't wait to see fucking Lemmy tonight.
Yeah, and hurt him.
I'm gonna shank him with this fucking razor blade rock.
The album 1916 is out in the stores, ladies and gentlemen. Go out and buy it.
Buy 3 copies.
Exactly. Give them to your friends.
I need the money.
Your parents will love it.
Just send me the money.
Now, with this album, Lemmy kind of tried to sell out with Motörhead. They moved the band to the States, and they were trying to cash in on the early 90s arena rock, arena metal sound that bands like Metallica were making famous. And honestly, they did a really great job with this album. And honestly, this kind of sellout direction really works with the band. Like the really dark and beautiful ballad, Love Me Forever, is so atmospheric and strong.
Everything changes, it all stays the same. Everyone yells.
And they don't lose any momentum with this new direction at all when delivering their classic Motörhead rockin' tunes like Ramones, which is clearly a tribute to the Ramones, Make My Day, One to Sing the Blues, and my favorite song on here, the Wham Bam Thank You Ma'am. I think I heard the backdoor slam hit, I'm So Bad Baby I Don't Care. And an interesting little tidbit, it was around this time that Lemmy was doing his very funny and classic fan mail show where he would answer and give genuine good advice to fans that would send letters to him.
I dig groups like Metallica, Slayer, Iron Maiden, Testament, Megadeth. No Motörhead I see. Love, hate, just about any good kick-ass metal band. My problem is, since I'm black, other blacks put me down and say that I'm a disgrace to the colour. If the bloody thing is ever going to work out properly, then we all have to intermarry and screw each other blind and get to be coffee-ish. But then we'd still find people that were lighter than those guys, right? You can't win with that one, but you can win by just doing it. Tell them to go to hell. March or croak, all your life a cosmic joke. Fill your days with piss and smoke. The wolf is at your door.
You know, a lot of fans completely shit on this album for no reason. I don't get it. To me, this is actually one of my personal favorite Motörhead albums, and I think it's way stronger than 1916 ever was. It's going the same direction, but it has much better classic arena metal songs on here. And at the time, Lemmy was actually doing a lot of co-writing with Ozzy that was doing a similar musical direction and helped write classic songs like Hellraiser and Mama, I'm Coming Home.
Tell me how this writing team up with Ozzy Osbourne for No More Tears came about.
They offered me money.
And Ozzy paid him back by appearing on the Motörhead song, I Ain't No Nice Guy. But I don't know how anyone could ignore the hard-hitting songs on here like Hellraiser, Name in Vain, Jack the Ripper, and my favorite song on here, the slow and badass Bad Religion.
Bad religion, bad religion, I need no guns or devils.
All the SpongeBob fans out there will remember in the SpongeBob movie when they go to that bar with the bubble-blowing babies that get beaten senselessly. There's actually a Motörhead song playing there that's from this album. Originally called You Better Run, they remade it for the movie called You Better Swim.
I got no reason to be paranoid.
Now, unfortunately, this is where they lose my personal favorite member of the band ever, Philthy Animal Taylor.
When he left, you left him and went and pinched my bird, and he was quite happy.
I did not pinch your bird.
I knew that.
She came round and grabbed me.
I know.
He only performed on a couple songs on here, and they had the Ozzy drummer, Tommy Aldridge, who also played with Whitesnake, perform most of this album, which is sad. So then to complete the lineup, they brought in the King Diamond, extremely technical drummer known as Mikkey Dee, who really just dumbs down his playing style in this band, which has never made sense to me.
I explain it like this. I can overplay these songs. Very, very simple, easy. I could do drums all over these songs and show how damn good I am, you know, with a million things. But that's not Motörhead. I'll destroy this music. I never want to do that. I like to keep it really straight and heavy. And when the shit gets there, it's supposed to taste good.
I mean, when Lemmy usually brings members of the band like Brian Robertson, he'd let them commingle with the sound and add his technique and make a cool new blend. But with Mikkey Dee, I would expect Motörhead to get super technical and super aggressive, balls to the wall, but he just dumbs his sound down. If they changed up the sound with him, it would have made some of the more repetitive albums later on really stick out. The band was recording in LA at the time during the LA riots, so they constantly had to put recording on hold, and they tried so hard to make this album and the past one become successful, but it just didn't work.
Hello, record companies, you're liars, cheats and thieves, I know.
Motörhead were just destined to never be the big popular metal band.
You've got new management, you've got a new record company behind you. Do you finally feel that Motörhead's business is in order?
No. I've felt like that every year for 19 years. I don't see why I should fall for it again this year.
Yeah. 93 we did Jay Leno. Any band, good or bad, especially super bad, they still sell more records, at least for 2 weeks after they've been on Jay Leno. And what happens to Motörhead? We sell less.
Our sales went down.
Now, Bastards brings momentum back really hard. They just did not give a shit anymore. And they hit you with arguably the heaviest, thrashiest album they've ever done. On Your Feet or On Your Knees and Burner, just rip your head off. And then you have the song Don't Let Daddy Kiss Me. On the past couple albums and with this one, they try to have a more dark ballad, almost like a power ballad. But Don't Let Daddy Kiss Me is literally about being molested, so it's about as dark as you can get.
Don't let Daddy kiss me. Don't let Daddy kiss me. Don't let Daddy kiss me.
And then even though they stopped trying to be as popular, they actually had a pretty decent famous song from here called Born to Raise Hell, which they re-recorded with Ice-T. Not Ice Cube the rapper, Ice-T from Body Count, the crossover thrash band, the guy that we like, appear on the song, and that was actually put on the film Airheads.
Born to raise hell, born to raise hell. We know how to do it and we do it real well. Born to raise hell, born to raise hell.
To all the metalheads that really want a heavy, thrashy Motörhead, this one is the album for you.
If you're not pissed off in the world today, there's something wrong with you. Hey, complacency, yeah? Die of that. And bad heart. Couch potato. Watch TV. Flick the channels if you get something that's nice and easy to watch. And it'll kill you.
So as if the band didn't have enough problems with lineups and drama, they started to have problems with Würzel. Now apparently he couldn't play guitar anymore and he would just keep fighting with the band and demanded more money, and it's just, I think Lemmy honestly would just get really tired of drama and kind of bury his head in the sand if there was a problem and just get rid of it as quickly as humanly possible. But even the rest of the lineup say that they were just really tired of Würzel at the time.
Well, Würzel left during Sacrifice, really. I mean, he left just after we'd finished it. And he only played one solo on the whole album, and he was gone already, really, before we started that album. His input was like very, minimal. It's a shame about Würzel. He started to believe the wrong people. Because I was his best friend in the band and off stage, I was his best friend, and he didn't believe it anymore. He started accusing me of stealing his money and I need Würzel's money, I mean, I got all that money coming from Hawkwind before and the Motörhead before him, I didn't need his money, and I wouldn't have stolen it even if I did.
It took him like 6 hours to try and do a solo with this one song on Sacrifice. In the end, he just slammed the guitar down and legged it.
It was both panic and satisfaction at the same time, because Würzel was also very tired of this, and we were very tired of him. It was a mutual thing. I miss him tremendously as a guy, but not as a guitar player. In the end, he was no good in the end.
I mean, it really sucks though, because Würzel was laying down some amazing solos. I preferred him to Phil Campbell, but I guess it just wasn't meant to be. This kind of brought in my personal least favorite Motörhead lineup, which would go to the very end of the band. Still good, but they would just always tend to lean heavily on repeating themselves with this lineup. Now, with this album, Sacrifice, a lot of fans feel like this is a huge underrated gem, and it's still good. It's impossible for Motörhead to ever make an album that sucks. But I think it's actually slightly overrated now these days. I don't really hear what a lot of the fans hear. To me, the production's weak. There's some mediocre songs on here. Sure, the title track and music video for it are absolutely awesome. It's a thrash metal song with amazing drumming.
Can you not see the stars in your eyes?
But I don't know, I just feel like a lot of songs feel half-baked and have weird melodies. But the best song on here has got to be the catchy, although very muddy sounding because of the weird production, In Another Time.
Here we are, win or lose, good and bad, burst and loose. Here we are, black and gold, in another time.
But even with my complaints, it's still overall a good album. Just probably the weakest thing they had done at this point since the first album.
Sacrifice. We were 4, but we were 3 actually, because he didn't play very much on that album at all, and he did not contribute anything.
Yeah.
So already then it was a 3-piece.
So now we're actually a 5-piece, but 2 guys left this morning.
Yeah, 2 girls.
That happens.
2 girls, yeah. They were dressed as guys.
There'll be more girls tonight, so we can expand.
Yeah, well, you never know. Maybe we'll recruit 6 more tonight then.
Yeah.
Why not?
The Motörhead Touring Review
tomorrow in
and
Detroit,
Glee Club.
We'd be 8-piece in Detroit tomorrow.
8-piece?
Yeah.
8-ball.
8-ball. Speedball's opening.
And with this new record, any particular tracks we should be aware of?
Yeah, all of them.
Overnight sensation, all mouth and no soul.
Now with Overnight Sensation, they brought the coolness factor and abundance with a better production, more bluesy elements. The band were firing on all cylinders again, and it's a really good, consistent 90s Motorhead era album. There's really good songs on here, like the title track, and the absolutely great, thrashy, speed metal song to open its Civil War. We're all familiar with Lemmy's very aggressive, abrasive vocal style at this time, but the song Don't Believe a Word on this album is actually very different. It's almost like a sensitive side of Lemmy to show he's actually a pretty good singer.
Let's talk about your new album, Snakebite Love.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
You're real excited about it, aren't you?
No.
You don't?
I don't get excited like that anymore. It's not that I don't think it's a good album. I think it's a great album. You know, but it's hard to maintain that sort of ooh wow, you know, stuff. Yeah. I mean, I know it's a good album. It's my nature to do albums, right? That's what I do. That's what I am. You know, I'm rock and roll. You know, yeah. I live in rock and roll. I do rock and roll. I am rock and roll, and I play damn good rock and roll too. And this is just another example of it, boys and girls.
Snakebite love. Snakebite love.
The band takes one step forward and then one step back. With Snakebite Love, Lemmy was actually sick during a lot of the producing of this album. And so what happens is the songs ended up suffering a little bit. There's a lot of mediocre ones on here, as well as the sound is very muffled and muddy like it was on Sacrifice. The best song in here is also the weirdest one, the Experimental Assassin, which feels like it has almost tribal drumming in it. And Mikkey Dee does this incredible drum solo in the middle to show that even though he's dumbing his drumming down, he's still one of the technical best players out there. Honestly, I think it's even weaker than Sacrifice, but it's pretty much impossible for Motörhead to make a bad one.
Was Motörhead. We were Motörhead.
This is one of the strongest Motörhead albums ever, especially if you're a speed or thrash metal fan. This album's for you, leaning heavy on the speed and punk elements this time around. I mean, how punky? For God's sake, they do a cover of God Save the Queen. You know, most of the time when metal bands do punk covers, they're god-awful. Look at Megadeth, for instance. But this is arguably better than the original. And of course, I gotta tell it the title track, We Are Motörhead, which is one of my all-time favorite Motörhead songs. It's basically a remake of the song Ace of Spades, a soft reboot, if you will. And I kind of prefer it. I think they should have opened or ended all of their shows with this song. It is an absolute classic. I just love that this album was a statement of the time. No matter how much the music industry changed, no matter what happened, they were always going to be Motörhead.
Buy in bulk, that's my advice.
How much do you drink a day?
Oh, quite a bit. I must be the most drunk diabetic in the world.
Now the band took 2 steps forward and now we're taking 2 steps back. I don't know what happened with this, but this album is very tired and very boring and arguably my least favorite Motörhead album ever made. The best song from these sessions is the song that Lemmy actually did for the WWE wrestler Triple H as his first entrance theme, The Game, which is such a famous song even outside of wrestling that everyone has heard this, even more than Ace of Spades. The Game is a badass song, and then Triple H actually repaid the favor by doing a vocal section of the song Serial Killer on this album.
And I will see the old world's back be broken as we descend into the awful, howling night.
But for an album released during 9/11 and an album called Hammered, it is very, very mediocre and tired.
That's the only record where we were pressed for time.
Ah, okay, right.
We should have had a few more weeks to work some more songs out. We had Tom Pananzio producing it.
Yeah.
And he's a great producer, but I thought he kind of was a little bit too intimidated by Lemmy. Lemmy had a tendency sometimes to be quite lazy in the studio.
Okay.
If he wrote a melody for a song, we listened to it and I said, hey, Lem, you know, you can do better than that. Ah, no, I don't. And once you convince Lemmy to go back home and write a different melody, if you could manage to do that 2 or 3 times, he came up with brilliant stuff. And it was right after 9/11 too. So the atmosphere in California was really bad.
Oh, right, yeah.
And to fix things after Hammered, Inferno is the best album the band has done in years.
Put the bass up, will you?
This is what the album Hammered should have been. Thanks to producer Cameron Webb coming in, lighting a hot fire under the band's ass from this point forward. We get an album that is beginning to end, no loss of momentum, the strongest thing this band has done since the 80s. And the album that actually got me into the band. If you're just struggling to get into Motörhead, it all sounds samey to you, try Inferno. This album is so heavy and so good sounding that even the 50s rock and roll sounding songs on here, or punk songs or bluesy songs, sound metal with how heavy the production is. The best example of that is my favorite song on the album, a song that sounds gargantuan heavy, In the Name of Tragedy. And as if the album couldn't get any better, the album ends with a country blues song called Whorehouse Blues, the music video featuring Lemmy's strip club that he used to go to all the time and showing Lemmy's love for black women. It's a completely different approach for the band, and it just shows that every time they try something different, it would be incredible and one of the greatest Motörhead songs.
Oh, the only thing that's missing is a little mouth hard blues. That's how we do it.
It's one of the greatest metal albums of the 2000s. It is so perfect. Highly recommend it. In fact, I would argue you could easily start with this album if you're trying to get into the band.
So all we can do is wish the new album, Kiss of Death, good luck. And we see you out there.
And if you don't like it, we'll make another one until you do like it.
You can't mess with Dr. Rock, so don't you even try. We're running through the city.
Now, Kiss of Death, although not as good as Inferno, I think it is almost as good. Honestly, the heavy moments on here are heavier than Inferno, and they hit with almost a power metal song, which is my favorite song on the album, Sword of Glory.
Soldier, soldier, see where we were. You have to know the story.
But with Inferno, even the lighter songs ended up sounding like massive with that production. On here, when they're doing more rockin' songs like Christine, it's very catchy and very good, but it actually sounds a little more poppy than what they were doing on Inferno. But unfortunately, Kiss of Death would actually kind of start the trend going forward, where a lot of Motörhead albums started to sound a little samey. They didn't get accused of being the AC/DC of speed metal, but Motörhead didn't give a shit. They were just going to do what Lemmy felt like doing at the time and performing like they were going to kick ass live.
What's the difference between Lemmy Kilmister and God?
God's taller.
Rock out, rock out, rock out. Let it crush your beer. Rock out, rock out.
Motorizer continues the momentum. It has great sound. This is actually around the time that they were working on that famous Lemmy documentary, which has lots of great scenes in it. The best song on here has got to be Teach You How to Sing the Blues, which is literally Lemmy teaching you in extreme detail how to be a man.
Don't like it when you lose. You shouldn't be sad. Don't get mad. Are we gonna teach you how to sing the blues?
Also, the album cover has all the band members' family crests on there, which is kind of cool. But honestly, nothing special here for the most part. Just a standard, good, tried and true Motörhead album.
What was the thinking behind the title?
Mainly sarcasm, because we all know the world is not ours. You know, like.
I wish the band would just change up the sound a little bit more. I mean, they just had Whorehouse Blues, which was a classic, and it just feels like we're just retreading water a little bit. But the band did find a formula that works. The opening song on here, Born to Lose, is honestly great and one of the strongest songs in this era. You really can't go wrong with any Motörhead album, especially in this era, but with consistency at this level, it starts to breed resentment from the fan base for just repeating yourself over and over.
Possibly the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has ignored you. Does that even matter to you?
Oh, they did even better than that. They lost my Ace of Spades tour jacket.
What's the story behind that?
Well, you know, they had this heavy metal presentation thing. They said, could they borrow a pair of boots and a bass and my Ace of Spades tour jacket, so I lent it to them, and they said they lost it. A likely story. Looked me in the eye and told me again, you know. So one of their girlfriends is wearing it, so no doubt.
So what if they bestowed that Hall of Fame honor on you? Is that something that you would even care about?
What honor? They owe me a jacket before I'll even speak to them. Anyway, the biggest room in there is the bloody gift shop.
Now, even though the band is sort of on a roll with a style that they love, Aftershock is actually a little bit of a change of pace because it has such a great production and sound to it and goes a little more on the bluesier end of things. And speaking of blues, Lost Woman Blues is probably the best song on here, going for an old school blues rock approach that Lemmy is so strong with, and honestly, once again, singing really well on here.
Because I swear I'm sick and tired singing these Lost Woman blues.
You know, it's interesting that by this point, this late in the game, with Lemmy being this ancient, this full of STDs, and his blood levels being this coated in acid.
He said, don't let him give any blood transfusions. He said, he no longer has real blood. He said it's toxic.
The band still sounds great, and Lemmy's voice is still mostly intact.
A new album comes out, it's called Bad Magic. Come buy it because all your girlfriends will take all their clothes off and rub themselves all over you. Okay?
Now, despite what I had just said about Aftershock and Lemmy's voice, Bad Magic is kind of the first time you'd ever hear Lemmy's voice ever sound weaker than it was. But I mean, the guy was literally dying of cancer at the time. Like, give him a break. It actually still sounds pretty good, and it's interesting that the moment that he actually sounds like he's aging is the time that he kicks the bucket. And despite this little vocal setback, Lemmy went out on his vocal prime. And it's sad that this ended up being the last album, unintentionally, of course. Philthy Animal Taylor had just died right before the album was released, and then Lemmy was really struggling at the time. He was having problems remembering lyrics on stage. He was pretty depressed about Phil going, as well as he actually almost collapsed on stage having breathing issues and had to cut a show short, but still had the utter balls and nerve to keep wanting to soldier on.
I would love to play for you, but I can't. I'm going to collapse or something. So please accept my apologies. Next time, all right?
I think Lemmy damn well knew something was wrong with him at this time. It seemed like he was extremely skinny, and obviously he would die of aggressive cancer. But I think no matter what happened, no matter how well known this cancer was to him, he would have just kept playing live until he dropped dead on stage, which he almost did. He was still making music, he was still planning on touring, and unfortunately he passed away. And the song on here, Till the End, is very eerie, because that's how Lemmy went at this point. He was gonna go till the end, till he damn well died. But even though this is kind of balls deep in the repetitive era of the band, Bad Magic is still a fine album to go out on.
I don't think it's important to have big success. It's important to go and produce some good records. So that even if you don't become popular like Van Gogh, rest his soul, until after you're dead, you know, then people will still get something from it, maybe 10 years down the road, you know, after you're gone. Like.
So this is the end of the ADHD coke-fueled speed run-through of the band Motörhead. Hopefully I got you into the discography, and I find it interesting that only now after Lemmy is gone, Motörhead is finally being acknowledged as being as important, influential, and as great as they truly are.
If there wasn't a Motörhead, there wouldn't be a Metallica.
You know, Guns N' Roses, Nirvana, Alice in Chains, 9 Inch Nails, modern rock music would be completely different.
Not just the band that everyone name checks as important and influential, but a band that actually has great songs and great albums. I thought Lemmy and Motörhead were awesome before he died, but it's good to know that with all of the classic lineup gone, now with Fast Eddie even being dead, that no matter what happens, Motörhead will always be one of the greatest.
It's in your face! Motörhead's in your face! Yeah! No compromise! Oh! It's ass metal! Huge! Great big Majumba metal! Women with massive knockers. So grosse Milchglockens. Mitten sie Waffen zu Trouserhosen und der Farten blasten from the Assenhosen. Mitten sie, oh yeah. That's heavy metal.
Subscribe to the Downfall Network.
No!